Thomas Walker stood in his empty bookshop, his heart heavy with sadness. The small space that had once been filled with books, the smell of coffee, and happy customers was now bare and silent. At 45 years old, Thomas felt older than ever. As he looked around the room where he had spent 15 wonderful years, the little bell above the door no longer rang with new customers. The wooden shelves that once held thousands of stories were dusty and empty. Thomas touched the counter where he had wrapped countless books in brown paper for excited readers. "Nobody wants real books anymore," he said softly to himself. "Everyone just reads on their phones and tablets now." The shop called Walker's Words had been Thomas's whole life. His father had loved books and had taught Thomas to love them too. When Thomas opened the shop 15 years ago, his father had been so proud. Now the shop was closed forever. Another, victim of changing times and the terrible pandemic that had kept customers away. Thomas put his old leather wallet in his pocket. It was much thinner these days. The shop had been making less and less money each month. The final bills had taken almost everything he had saved. As Thomas locked the door one last time, he felt a drop of rain on his face. Soon it was pouring, as if the sky was crying with him. He turned and walked away, his shoulders bent under the weight of his failure. The walk to his small flat felt longer than usual. Thomas passed shops and cafes, some open and some closed forever like his own. The streets were quiet in the rain. As he hurried past the community center, a bright poster caught his eye. The colorful sign read, "Neighborhood Literacy Program. Volunteers Needed." There was a picture of a child reading a book, looking happy and excited. Thomas stopped and looked at the poster. He remembered being a young boy who couldn't read well. The other children had laughed at him when he made mistakes in class. His mother had spent hours helping him, reading together every night until the words became clear. Because of her, he had grown to love books so much that he made them his life's work. "I could help," he thought for a moment. "I know books. I know how to share the love of reading." But then the cold rain soaked through his coat, and doubt crept into his mind. What did he have to offer now? He was just a failed shop owner with nothing left. Who would want his help? Thomas shook his head and walked on, leaving the poster behind. At home, Thomas's flat was quiet, except for the sound of rain against the windows. Cardboard boxes filled the small living room, each one containing books he couldn't bear to sell when the shop closed. His most treasured stories and volumes, once his pride and joy, now just reminded him of what he had lost. Thomas made a cup of tea and sat in his old armchair. He picked up a book from one of the boxes, a copy of Great Expectations that his father had given him for his 16th birthday. The pages were yellow with age, the spine cracked from being opened many times. As night fell, Thomas sat alone, with his books and his memories. The rain kept falling outside, matching his dark mood. He had no shop, little money, and no idea what to do next. The books that had given him so much joy throughout his life now brought only pain, each one a reminder of his failed dream. But deep inside, so small he could barely feel it, the spark from the volunteer poster hadn't completely died. A tiny voice wondered if perhaps his story wasn't over, just changing to a new chapter he hadn't expected. Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the colorful poster at the community center. Each morning on his walk to the small cafe where he now had coffee, he would slow down as he passed by. He would look at the smiling children in the picture and read the words again. Neighborhood Literacy Program. Volunteers Needed. The community center was an old brick building with wide steps leading to the front door. Thomas never went inside. He would just look at the poster, think about it for a moment, then walk on. But each day, he walked a little slower and stopped, a little longer. On Friday morning, the sky was gray and the air was cool. Thomas wore his old brown coat and walked with his hands in his pockets. As he came near the community center, he saw a young woman at the bottom of the steps. She was trying to carry 3 large boxes at once. The woman had short brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. As Thomas watched, one of the boxes started to slip. Without thinking, Thomas ran forward and caught the box just before it fell. "Oh, thank goodness," the woman said with a big smile. "My hero. These books are getting heavier by the minute." Thomas found himself smiling back. "Let me help you," he said, taking two of the boxes from her arms. "I'm Emma Lewis," she said as they walked up the steps together. "I run the literacy program here. These boxes are full of book donations, but I'm drowning in them. There's no system yet." Thomas followed Emma inside the community center. The front hall was bright and clean, with notices on the walls about different classes and events. Emma led him down a corridor to a room at the back of the building. The room was small but full of life. Bookshelves of different sizes stood against the walls, none of them matching. Some were painted bright colors. Colorful pillows were piled in one corner, making a reading nook. Children's drawings covered one wall, showing stick figures holding books and smiling. "Just put those down anywhere," Emma said, placing her box on a table already covered with stacks of books. "As you can see, we're a bit of a mess." Thomas looked around the room. Books were everywhere, in piles on the floor, stacked on chairs, filling boxes. "You have quite a collection," he said. Emma pushed her glasses up her nose. "The program is growing faster than we can handle," she explained. "Since the lockdown, so many children have fallen behind in their reading. Parents are worried and schools can't give extra help to everyone. We're trying to fill that gap, but—" she waved her hand at the chaos of books. "We need someone who really knows books, who can help us organize and find the right books for each child." Thomas thought about his closed bookshop. For 15 years he had matched readers with the perfect book. He had organized shelves and created displays. He had known where every book belonged. "I could help," Thomas heard himself say. "I used to own a bookshop. I know books." Emma's face lit up like someone had turned on a light inside her. "Really? That would be amazing. Could you start on Monday? Nothing fancy, just helping sort these books and then maybe helping kids discover stories they'll love." Thomas nodded, surprised at himself. "Yes, I could start Monday." Over the weekend, Thomas felt different. He looked at the boxes of books in his flat with new eyes. These weren't just painful reminders anymore. They could help children who needed them. He spent Saturday and Sunday sorting through his collection. He picked out books that had been his favorites as a child. Adventure stories, funny tales, books about animals and far-off places. He packed them carefully in a box, feeling a small flutter of excitement in his chest. For the first time since closing his shop, he felt a sense of purpose. When Monday morning came, the sun was shining brightly, as if approving of Thomas's decision. He put on a clean shirt and his better pair of trousers. He picked up his old copy of The Wind in the Willows, the first book he had truly loved as a child, and placed it carefully in his bag. As Thomas walked to the community center, his steps were lighter than they had been in months. The heavy weight he had carried since closing his shop felt just a bit less crushing. He wasn't a failed bookshop owner today. Today, he was going to help children discover the magic of books. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Thomas soon fell into a new routine. Every morning he would have his toast and tea, then spend a few hours organizing books at the community center. After lunch, he would work with children who needed help with reading. The small room with its colorful pillows and mismatched shelves began to feel like a second home. Emma had set up a schedule for Thomas. Different children came on different days. Some were shy and quiet. Others were loud and full of energy. All of them needed help with reading, and Thomas found he was good at helping them. There was one boy who stood out from the rest. Oliver Brown was 8 years old with messy brown hair and a face full of freckles. He reminded Thomas of himself as a child. Oliver was smart, but angry. He didn't want to be there. On their first day together, Oliver sat with his arms crossed, tight across his chest. "I hate reading," Oliver said in a loud voice. His blue eyes were hard and his mouth was set in a firm line. "It's stupid and I'm stupid at it." Thomas didn't argue or tell Oliver he was wrong. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You know what? Reading was once my enemy too," he said. Oliver looked surprised. Adults usually told him reading was easy, or that he just needed to try harder. "When I was your age," Thomas continued, "I thought reading was the worst thing in the world. The letters seemed to jump around on the page. The other kids laughed when I made mistakes." Thomas reached into his bag and pulled out an old worn book. The cover showed a pirate ship. "But then I met a pirate named Long John Silver and everything changed." "A real pirate?" Oliver asked, looking doubtful but a little interested. "Well, Not a real one. A story pirate. The best kind, Thomas answered. Would you like to meet him? Oliver shrugged, trying to look like he didn't care, but he moved closer as Thomas opened the book. Thomas began to read from Treasure Island. He used a deep, rough voice for Long John Silver. He made his voice shake with fear when reading about Jim Hawkins hiding from the pirates. He waved his arms to show the rolling of the ship on the waves. At first Oliver sat stiffly, pretending not to listen, but soon he leaned forward, his eyes wide, caught up in the story of pirates and hidden treasure. When Thomas finished the first chapter, Oliver looked disappointed. That's all for today, Thomas said, closing the book. What happens next? Oliver asked quickly, then looked embarrassed at showing interest. We can find out tomorrow, Thomas said, or if you want you could try reading a bit yourself. Oliver's face fell. I can't. The words get all mixed up. Let's try together, Thomas suggested. Just one paragraph. I'll help with the hard words. Very reluctantly, Oliver took the book. He struggled with many words, his face getting red with effort. But Thomas was patient, never rushing him or showing frustration. At the end of the paragraph, Oliver looked up in surprise. I did it, he said quietly. You did, Thomas agreed. Good job, Oliver. Same time tomorrow? Oliver nodded, a small smile on his face. Each day after that brought small steps forward. Oliver still had bad days when he wanted to give up, but more. And more he showed up eager to continue the story. Thomas taught him tricks for sounding out difficult words and ways to use the rest of the sentence to guess what an unknown word might be. Other children were making progress too. Thomas created a chart where they could put star stickers when they finished a book. The wall was soon shining with gold stars. Emma often stood in the doorway watching Thomas work with the children. She saw how he knew exactly which book would excite each child. She noticed how he never made them feel bad about their struggles. One rainy afternoon, when the last child had gone home, Emma invited Thomas to have coffee at the small cafe across the street. They sat by the window watching the rain fall as they warmed their hands on their coffee cups. You've got a real gift, Thomas, Emma said. Her eyes were warm behind her glasses. The children love you. Oliver's teacher called me yesterday. She said his behavior in class has improved so much. He used to disrupt lessons and refuse to participate. Now he's putting his hand up to read aloud. Thomas looked down at his coffee, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't exactly pride he felt. It was something gentler, something that felt like healing. The pain of losing his bookshop was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. As before, I'm just sharing what I love, he said simply. And that's the gift, Emma replied. You're not just teaching them to read, you're showing them why reading matters. You're giving them stories they can get lost in. Thomas smiled. For years his bookshop had been the way he shared his love of books with the world. He had thought that path was closed forever, but here, in this small room with children who struggled just as he once had, he had found a new way to share that love. Perhaps losing his shop wasn't the end of his story after all. Perhaps it was just the beginning of a new chapter. The leaves turned red and gold, then fell from the trees. Cold winds began to blow. Thomas bought a warmer coat and kept working at the community center. He now knew all the children by name. They ran to greet him when they arrived, eager to show him how their reading had improved. One cold November. Morning. Thomas checked his mail. Among the bills was a letter with handwriting he knew well. It was from Mr. Jenkins, the man who owned the building where Thomas's bookshop had been. Thomas opened it with shaking hands, wondering what Mr. Jenkins could want. Dear Thomas, the letter began, I'm retiring next month and selling most of my buildings. Before I do, I wanted to write to you about your old shop space. It has been empty since you left. No one has wanted to rent it. I remember how your shop brought life to the neighborhood. People miss it, they miss you. Thomas had to stop reading for a moment. His heart was beating fast. I have an offer for you, the letter continued. The space is yours at half the rent. You paid before if you want to try again. I know times are hard, but I believe in what you did there. Think about it. Let me know by the end of the month. Thomas sat at his small kitchen table for a long time, the letter in front of him. Half the rent was a very good offer, but could he do it? Could he open a bookshop again after failing once? The thought filled him with fear. What if he lost everything? A second time? That night, Thomas hardly slept. He kept thinking about the empty shop and the letter. He thought about the money he had left. Not much, but maybe enough to start again with a smaller stock of books. He thought about how it had felt to close the shop, the pain and shame of it. The next day, Thomas went to the community center as usual. Oliver was waiting for him, bouncing with excitement. Today they were finishing Treasure Island. Oliver had worked hard, and today he was going to read the last chapter all by himself. Thomas sat and listened as Oliver read. The boy still struggled with some of the harder words, but he kept going. His face was alive with concentration. When he finished, he closed the book with a big smile. "I did it, Mr. Walker. I read a whole chapter." "You certainly did," Thomas said, feeling proud, "and you did it wonderfully." Oliver looked down at the book in his hands. "Mr. Walker," he said, "my mum wants to know where she can buy books like this one. She says I can have a book for Christmas, a book of my very own." Thomas felt something shift inside him, like a key turning in a lock. He remembered why he had opened his bookshop in the first place. It wasn't just to sell books. It was to connect people with stories that might change their lives, just as stories had changed his. He had lost sight of that purpose over the years, thinking only about money and staying open. "I'll help your mum find the perfect book for you, Oliver," Thomas promised. That evening, Thomas invited Emma to dinner at the small Italian restaurant on the high street. They ordered pasta and talked about the children's progress. Thomas liked the way Emma's eyes lit up when she talked about her work. He liked her laugh and her kind heart. After their meal, Thomas took a deep breath and showed Emma the letter from Mr. Jenkins. "He's offering me my old shop at half the rent," Thomas explained. "I've been thinking about it all day." "Are you going to do it?" Emma asked. "Open your bookshop again?" "I'm scared," Thomas admitted. "What if I fail again?" But today Oliver asked where his mother could buy him a book for Christmas, and I realized something. I opened that shop because I wanted to connect people with stories they would love. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Emma nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I have an idea," Thomas said. "What if it wasn't just a bookshop this time? What if part of it was a space for the literacy program? We could have regular sessions there, just like at the center, but we could also sell books that people might not find in the big chain stores. Books that could change lives." "A bookshop and literacy center combined," Emma said, her eyes wide with interest. "That could work. The shop would bring in money, and the literacy program would bring in families who might then buy books. It would be different from before," Thomas said. "More about community, less about just selling." "It sounds perfect," Emma said. "But are you sure you want to take the risk?" Thomas looked down at his hands. "It's terrifying," he admitted, "but maybe that's how I know it matters. The things that scare us the most are often the things most worth doing." Emma reached across the table and took his hand in hers. Her touch was warm and comforting. "You won't be doing it alone this time, Thomas," she said softly. "I believe in what you're trying to do. I want to help." Thomas looked at their joined hands, then up at Emma's kind face. For the first time in a very long time, he felt hope taking root inside him, growing stronger than his fear. Spring came, then summer. Thomas and Emma worked hard turning the empty shop into something new. They painted the walls a warm yellow. They built new shelves and filled them with carefully chosen books. They hung colorful signs in the windows. Thomas put all his savings into buying books. Emma helped with the business plan. They applied for a small grant to support the literacy program. Local carpenters built a special reading area in the back room, with soft chairs and low tables for the children. 6 months after Thomas received Mr. Jenkins's letter, Walker's Words and Wonders was ready to open. The shop had 2 parts. The front was a bookshop with shelves of books for all ages. The back room was for the literacy program, with space for reading lessons and story time. On opening day, Thomas woke up early. He put on his best shirt and the tie Emma had given him for his birthday. His hands shook as he tied it. So much could still go wrong. Would anyone come? Would they like what he and Emma had created? Thomas walked to the shop an hour before opening. Time. Emma was already there, putting fresh flowers on the counter. She looked beautiful in a blue dress, her short hair neatly combed. She gave Thomas a quick kiss on the cheek. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Thomas replied. At 10 o'clock, they opened the doors. Thomas had worried for nothing. People started coming right away. First, it was just a few curious neighbors. Then more people arrived. By noon, the shop was full of people looking at books and talking happily. Thomas saw many familiar faces. There were parents of children from the literacy program. Teachers from local schools came to see the new reading space. Some of Thomas's old customers from his first shop were there too, happy to see him back in business. Best of all, the children came. They ran straight to the back room where colorful pillows and low bookshelves waited for them. They picked up books and showed them to each other with excited voices. At 2 o'clock, it was time for the official opening. A red ribbon had been stretched across the front door. Oliver was there in his best clothes, his hair neatly combed for once. Thomas had asked him to cut the ribbon because Oliver had been the first child he had helped at the community center. The mayor made a short speech about how important books were for the community. Then he handed Oliver a large pair of scissors. Everyone counted down. 3, 2, 1. Oliver cut the ribbon. Everyone clapped and cheered. Cameras flashed as people took pictures. "Speech," someone called out. Others joined in, calling for Thomas to say something. Thomas hadn't planned to speak. He didn't like being the center of attention. But Emma gently pushed him forward, and he found himself standing in front of everyone. Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice shaking a little. He took a deep breath and continued. "A year ago, I thought losing my shop was the end of my story. I was wrong. It was just the beginning of a better chapter." Thomas looked at Emma, who was smiling at him with tears in her eyes. In the past 6 months, she had become more than a business partner. They had fallen in love while painting walls and unpacking books. "I've learned that sometimes life takes away what we thought we wanted to give us what we truly need," Thomas continued. "This new shop isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us, to the community, to the children, to everyone who believes in the power of stories." People clapped and cheered. Thomas felt his face get red. He wasn't used to so much attention. As people began to look at books again, Oliver tugged at Thomas's sleeve. His face was serious. "Mr. Walker," he said, "does this mean I can read here whenever I want?" Thomas knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. "This place exists because of readers like you, Oliver," he said. "It will always be your home." "Too." Oliver's face broke into a wide smile. He ran off to tell his mother the good news. The rest of the day was busy and happy. People bought books. Children listened to Emma read stories in the back room. Teachers signed up their classes for reading sessions. By closing time, Thomas was tired but happy. After the last customer left, Thomas locked the door and turned the E. Sign to closed. Emma was in the back room, tidying up the pillows and books the children had left scattered around. Thomas made them both a cup of tea. They sat together on the story time rug, surrounded by shelves of books and the smell of new paint. Outside, the street was quiet as evening fell. "Are you happy?" Emma asked simply. Thomas looked around at the shop. 1 year ago, he had lost everything. He had felt like a failure. Now he had a new shop, a new purpose, and a new love. His life had fallen apart, but in breaking, it had made room for something better to grow. "Yes," Thomas said, taking Emma's hand. "More than I ever thought possible." Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside, surrounded by books filled with countless worlds and adventures, Thomas and Emma sat together, ready to write the next chapter of their story.